Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff with Fluent American checking in once more. Today, we are going to, as always, target your pronunciation. I have some sentences that we'll be going through and giving some suggestions on how I would say them. And then we'll also be listening to your audios. And of course, I'll get some feedback. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. What is going on? Let me do this. All right, let me try that. And let me just try one last thing. That's interesting because that did not happen last time. Technical difficulties are always fun, aren't they? Give me 1 second, guys. Hello to everyone, by the way. Hello to Denny. Hello to Shok. Hello to Emmanuel and Hamid. Everyone's checking in, which is great. Hello to everyone, by the way. Hello to Denny. Sorry, you may hear down the microphone. Okay, let's try this. This might work a little better. Okay, joining us today, sorry about the technicals. What's going on, Coach? What's going on is I'm getting some audio coming here, but also audio coming from multiple places at the same time. And obviously, we don't want that. But I can deal. We'll be okay. All right. So joining us today, we have a very special guest. And let me just show this first.
Like in elongate.
Vulnerability. Vulnerability.
Can you pronounce these common reductions in American English? I asked her.
Like this. I just bought a car. But why? The rule of 3.
Joining us today is Julie. How's it going?
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Fluent American. Hi, everybody who's on the call today. That was great. Thank you for that introduction.
Of course.
Things are great. Things are great. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
We're so happy to have you here. Can you just take a moment just to kind of introduce yourself to us?
Of course. My name is Julie. I am the owner of San Diego Voice and Accent. So I'm a professional American accent coach, and I also help professionals with their voice projection and presentation skills. So I have a YouTube channel myself called San Diego Voice and Accent. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, if those are better platforms as well. I publish videos around each week, trying to get back to that. So lots of free resources there on my channel. And I also work with clients one-on-one, and I have a group class as well called Julie's Conversation Club. It's really cheap to join, $5 a month. You can join me for a live English class each week, and I'll give you some feedback on your pronunciation. And I also do private lessons as well, if that's something that you're interested in. So I kind of do a little bit of everything. But yeah, this is my first YouTube live, so I'm excited to try this out today.
That so blows my mind. So make sure everyone please be nice, be kind. Live streaming is fun. We want to show that to Julie so she can do it more. Another thing too is that at least before the world situation changed, I was pretty involved in the poetry community. So people would have books, and the most common price, if you made a new book, like a chapbook on your own, you'd be like, it's only $5. And then everyone in the crowd would be like, only $5? That's so reasonable. $5 for a month sounds great. Yep.
Yeah. I wanted it to be easily accessible for lots of people. So yeah, we have fun. It's every week we have a live class. So it's a fun time.
Cool. That's great. Yeah. And I'll give you some more chances to kind of talk about what you do in that class and things like that as well.
Sure.
But yeah, so today we're going to be looking at a couple of sentences, again, paying attention to stress, linking, reductions, pronunciation of vowel sounds, intonation, all that fun stuff. Let's kind of take a look at our first sentence just to see what people are going to be saying. And I'll say this first sentence. So and again, these have no context whatsoever. So it certainly makes this somewhat of a difficult exercise. But if I were going to say this sentence, I would say this as, can you remind me what's your name again? How would you say that, Julie?
Can you remind me what your name is again? Sorry, let me make my screen a little bigger so I can see the
For sure.
sentence a little
Take your
bit
time.
better.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a tiny screen here.
Understood.
Can you remind me what's your name again? Can you
Mhm,
remind me what's your name again?
mhm, mhm. I would say even just kind of listening to you, one thing is that I feel like I often really reduce like the what's your name, like what's your name, just kind of like what, almost like what's your name.
What's your
But
name? Yeah.
obviously, it's certainly possible to make the S sound clearer as well. Nothing wrong with that. Um, Other things that kind of stand out to you about this sentence.
Um,
Sorry, one.
can you remind me what's your name again? The D in remind gets dropped quite often as well because of the
Mhm,
way it links up with the next word.
mhm,
Remind me, remind me. No one
mhm,
really. You can pronounce the D if you want, but in fast speech, that would get dropped as well.
mhm, mhm. Other places, speaking of reductions and things like that, other places where you see linking occurring in this sentence.
Can you remind me what's your name again? Well, you mentioned the what's your name, how you
Mhm,
really would reduce that. So that has that the special ch sound that comes in there when you link the t to the ya sound.
mhm,
What's your name? What's your name again?
mhm,
What's your name again?
mhm,
Um, and there's lots of the whole phrase is kind of linked up together nicely. There's not really any pauses. Can you remind me what's your name again? Remind me what's your
mhm,
name again? Yeah, the one like true kind of linking rule that I do here is that ch sound and
mhm,
that really
mhm.
kind of blends those two words together.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably the most noticeable one. And also, like what and you is a very common situation where you see that occurring, but this can be anytime you see like a T followed by a strong US sound, like like again, the what's you, or that's probably the easiest example that I can think of right
Yeah.
now, but
Yeah.
you're going to see across other words as
Watch
well.
your yeah, there's
Like
there's
watch,
lots
yeah,
of it comes
hmm,
up a lot. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm. Um, Other places where you might see it, like that first part, like can you remind me, like can you that end sound can be pretty soft, potentially depending on how fast you're doing it. There's nothing wrong again if you do like can you. There's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of times it's more like can you, like can you remind me. Um, One other thing, I just speaking of reductions, one thing that we always want to be paying attention to. Hello, Shok. Hello, Mesa. Hello to Mary. All our people are in the house. This is great. One thing I see a lot of students doing, and Julia, I don't know if you've seen a lot of your students doing this too, is taking long I sounds and reducing them almost to like S sounds or like A sounds. So like a word like city become like city and like things like that. So long I's tend to actually maintain the long I sound. It's not something that you see get reduced as often. So like
Mhm.
I wouldn't necessarily say like remind me, like can you remind me versus remind me. So I would just make sure to, in general, you want to kind of keep that long I sound on me. I think it's kind of a safe
Yeah.
option. Yeah.
I would definitely agree, and I hear that most often with, native speakers of Russian. That's like
Russian's a
a
big
speaker
one.
that might sound
Hmm.
out they might kind of reduce that final
Hmm.
E sound to a shorter I sound,
Hmm.
definitely.
Definitely see with Russian. Definitely see with also occasionally some Asian language groups, some dialects of Chinese and things like that. I also
Mm.
see that with some students as well. So just kind of something to be paying attention to. Other things here. So let's talk about, if you had to pick a sound in this sentence that you think is particularly difficult for people to say, what sound would you choose?
Ooh, that's a great question. Let me look at the sentence again. Can you remind me what's your name again? Well, this sentence has it at least has one R-colored vowel in there, your, which often will get reduced to
Mhm,
what's your, and not your. So, I mean, R-colored vowels are the R sound in general, but also when it's an R that comes after a vowel, that can just be tricky for many people, depending on the native language.
mhm,
So
mhm,
even reducing the word your to your and pronouncing it with the sound
mhm,
rather than the or sound, that can be a really hard habit to
mhm,
break, because you see the full word, you want to say your, and you want to give it that full vowel, that full or sound, but native speakers will reduce it almost all the time, unless they're
yeah,
stressing the word your for some reason. So that one stood out to me as probably I would hear something, maybe a reduced R quality on the sound in or a tapped R or something else, something different would happen there.
mhm, mhm. They may have turned this sentence into mush. I think that's very easy to do. There's not necessarily a whole lot of stressed words here. It's just easy for it to come mush. And totally agreeing with R sounds. What I see with R sounds a lot is I get these really tend to get R sounds that are either really tense, like where it's like, the back of the tongue is so high and so far back that it's really restricting airflow.
Mm.
The big difference between like an and an is just kind of like the amount of air I'm letting to get through, kind of through my throat, through the back of my mouth a little bit. So just, make sure air can still flow through. Or sometimes the opposite problem where the tongue is almost non-existent. It's like super low. So you get like this type
Mhm.
sound as well. So just kind of watching
Definitely.
out for R's. I think that's a good letter to pick out on. I would also say the can. Probably going to get reduced here. Probably going to get more of a can. Like, can you remind me? Can you remind me? If you wanted to hold it, fine. Not necessarily anything wrong with that. Like, can you remind me? But just be aware of that sound linking to an N tends to be also a very, it can be a difficult linking that goes on. It's going to some more and as you get closer to that N, make sure you have enough air coming through your nose right before it. Because that's not can, it's not con, it's can, kind of just watching out for that plus that nasal.
Yeah, that's a great one too. The reduction might happen there, but also that the
Mhm,
nasalization that might happen to the "a" vowel before the "n," and
mhm.
native speakers differ on how much they
Yes.
nasalize it. I
Yes.
I think I nasalize it quite a bit,
You're in
being
California?
from California,
Yes.
yep. And so that's a fun thing to teach somebody, and when they can actually kind of imitate that nasalization, it's a more advanced, I would say, more
Yeah.
advanced pronunciation topic of
Mhm,
English, and it's not necessary to be understood.
mhm.
But when people wanna try to master it, it is really fun to learn because they think, "What are you what are you doing to that?" Like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, well, I'm from California, and we do it more than
Mhm,
other native speakers, but this is how
mhm,
it sounds,"
mhm,
but
mhm.
the "a" vowel in particular will change quite a bit.
Yes. Yes, I think that's a very fair thing. Last thing for this sentence before we look at our other one, stresses. What words would you stress here?
Uh, remind me, what's your name? What's your name again? Can you
Those
remind me
those
what's your
exactly ones I was
remind
thinking.
and name? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking. I mean, in theory, you could even make it one thought group if you really, really want it and you're really moving fast. The one stress I would say you really need is name. That's kind of the most important information I would say in that
Yeah.
sentence.
Mhm.
Cool.
Mhm.
Other last things about this sentence before we look at our second one.
Um, no, just thinking about stress, there's lots of ways you could stress this sentence
For sure.
depending on what your message is, which makes stress so fun to talk about, but also so
Yes.
frustrating to talk about. So that's all just, there's more ways to stress it, but, I agree, remind and definitely name. Name would
Mhm,
probably have the most no matter what
mhm.
stress pattern you wanted to use, you'd want to
Yep.
stress that the most.
Cool. We do have a question here from Mary. Practice for producing TH sounds, specifically for Persian speakers. How do you usually teach THs?
Well, I'll typically find what sound are they substituting instead. So typically it's
That's a
going
good
to
answer.
be if it's going to be a voiceless th like the beginning of the word think or the last sound in the word south, that's the voiceless th sound. What typically will happen is it's going to be an s substitution or a t substitution maybe depending on where they're from,
Hmm.
in my experience. And
Yeah.
so you find out what the substitution is, and then it's if it's an S sound, if they substitute, so instead of saying think, they might say sink. So that's a tongue placement uh, error, and so you just kind of fix the tongue placement. They have the right airflow. They're making the correct kind of continuous airflow, just like the th sound.
Hmm.
So it's a
Hmm.
placement issue of the tongue. So you fix that and kind of show them, oh, stick the tongue out. And then you also some people feel very uncomfortable making this th sound because they have to stick their tongue out. But just, using a mirror is obviously it's a really good technique. So you can actually see, is my tongue out, and kind of describing where the airflow should be exiting the mouth. Is it a big stream? Is it a small stream? Lots of visual cues. So, I show lots of pictures, but I definitely encourage using a mirror, and focusing on the placement of the tongue, but then the airflow piece. If they're making more of a T sound, or if it's the voiced TH, like at the beginning of the word the, that might turn into duh. And so again, that's a tongue placement issue. The tongue is too far, is in the mouth and kind of hitting that bumpy ridge behind the upper teeth. But also it's an airflow issue, because now if you've turned the TH into a D sound, you've stopped the air. And so this voiced TH, it can be reduced a little bit, but you don't want it to be a stop. It's not a full stop of airflow usually. So if I hear a full stop, if your tongue is too high, I'll hear a D instead of a TH. So then you have to kind of, okay, now let's work on airflow and let's work on tongue placement. So I don't know if hopefully I answered that, but looking
Yeah.
at what the substitution is first, and then finding, which instructions to give.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think one thing. Oh, by the way, you may, of course, as always, guys, you may hear my dog, you may hear my son, you may hear my wife.
I have a cat in here somewhere. He might join
they're
us
gonna
soon
make an
too.
appearance.
Yeah.
Did they jump on you
He
at
might.
all?
No, but he'll meow because he'll want to
Okay.
get out. I have the door
Gotcha.
shut, so he'll be
Gotcha.
loud.
Of course. No, sorry. So just that's your warnings for now. What I see a lot with THs too is that especially with regards to linking, like if you have a TH sound followed by an S, or a TH sound that's followed by a D or Z's and things like that, that also can be a very tricky combination, and I think what you mentioned about airflow, don't stop the air. If there's one lesson that you learned today, it's don't stop the air on those THs. If you stop the air, you're going to get like a T or a D, or not quite the sound you're looking for. I think especially when it comes to like linking and rapid speech, sometimes what you may find is that having your tongue in between your teeth is a little bit too low. Having your tongue just very slightly higher, making some contact with the top tooth, can be enough in rapid speech to still get that TH sound across without it turning into like an S or a D or things like that. So like Mary, going to your question specifically, is there any kind of practice for producing TH sound? I would also ask, like, are there specific words that you notice you're having a hard time with? But I think that practicing combinations, like for instance, I think I actually have a video that kind of goes through these like linking words together. So for instance, like taking a word like, for instance, like bath soap, or like even a combination, for instance, like the day and things like that, and just trying to make sure I would record yourself. Mirrors are also, I mean, if you're a pronunciation, you need two things: you need a mirror and you need a recorder. And also, I guess you need headphones. You need to be able to listen to yourself too. But kind of practicing those sorts of combinations and making sure that they're clear enough. So, like for instance, if you're saying bath soap, like bath soap, bath soap. And if you're finding that it's difficult, you can even make it smaller. Like, see if you can go from like a TH to an S. Like, can you do like a and if you're finding that difficult, one exercise that you can do is pronounce the TH first, pause, and then add an S sound. It's like, and then what you can do is you repeat that exercise like 3, 4, 5 times, and each time make the pause just a little bit shorter. It's like, and each time you do it, because you can kind of see where the difficulty comes in. Is it coming in more towards the end of the sound? Is it coming in? Are you even having trouble doing the and then the, so trying to see what part of the sound is actually difficult for you. Julie, any other exercise that you would recommend for kind of just practicing that TH?
Yeah, those are great, wonderful techniques that you've offered to the listeners. If people have a hard time just sticking their tongue out, they just feel like I can't do it. I mean, if that motion is so unnatural for you, I mean, you can practice the TH by sticking a lot of your tongue out at first, just to get the tongue to want to come out, and then you'll pull the tongue back in, because native speakers, it really is just the very tip of the tongue that's coming out. But for some speakers, I had a client who spoke Hindi as a native language. And so he had the habit of kind of flexing his tongue or curling his tongue back quite a bit. And so he did that with the TH sound as well. And so just to get the tongue into a forward placement, I said, okay, stick your tongue, far out of your mouth, just to get used to that sensation. And then we kind of pulled it in. So depending on how what it's like for you when you're trying to pronounce this sound. Just even if that's difficult, you can try that
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think pronunciation, if you're learning pronunciation, you need to exaggerate because you're naturally going to tone things down in conversations anyway. So I think, you're not just so many students who are doing pronunciation, you're making changes that are like this big, but the reality is you need to make changes that are this big, Um, like a pronunciation class, in my opinion, should feel a little bit uncomfortable and feel a little weird. Because if it's not,
Yeah.
then you're probably staying with what you're comfortable with, and
Yeah,
that's
it needs to feel different. I mean,
yeah,
that's if it doesn't feel different, then that means you haven't really changed anything yet.
yeah,
It should feel at least a little different, and then it should also sound a little different, but
yeah,
you should notice, "Oh, yeah, my mouth is moving differently."
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a workout. It's definitely a
Yeah.
workout. Let's see our second sentence here. All right, Julie, how would you say this?
Okay, let me just read it slowly because I have my
Take your
small
time.
screen.
Oh
There's
no.
no way we'll make it back in time. Okay, there's
Mhm.
no way we'll make it back in time. Um, so if I'm going to imagine the scenario,
Let's make a
the
story. Yeah, let's make a
context of
story.
this, the story of this, I would probably want to stress it, and I'd pronounce it like this: "There's no way we'll make it back in time." I probably, knowing my personality, I would wanna stress that "no way."
Hmm.
That just kinda just feels natural for my personality. So,
Yeah,
yeah, there's no way we'll make it back in time.
I think it's a very fair answer. You're putting. I feel like you're even putting a little bit more weight on no, which is obviously perfectly fine. I probably would have gone with the way. Like, there's no way we'll make it back. Like, there's no way we'll make
Oh,
it
yeah.
back in time. Like, but
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
I think either of those two options. If there's a part of the sentence that needs to be strong, it's probably going to be the no or the way, or
Mhm.
obviously, or even both, potentially. Um, you could, if you wanted another stress. I guess in theory, you could maybe put another stress maybe on back. Like, there's no way we'll make it back in time. No way we'll make it back in time. I
Yeah.
I don't think you'd be as likely to put the stress on time. Like, is it possible? Yeah, but I don't like. There's no way we'll make it back in time. Could work, but I think back would be a more natural spot for me.
Yeah, I
Other
agree.
places for stresses. I think those are the main ones.
Yeah, only if you wanted to shift the stress for emphasis, and that would be very dependent on the conversation.
Right.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
Yeah.
You're
Hmm.
referencing the 2 of you and not the other people or something
Exactly.
like that. But yeah,
Exactly.
the most natural, normal intonation, yeah, there's no way we'll make it back in
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
And I agree, back might have some secondary stress. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Other things. Let's talk about stress. Let's talk about linking. Any major linking you're seeing here?
No way. Yeah, there is a lot of linking here. There's no way. So that I mean, that's not like a true linking rule, the final Z sound in theirs to the
Hmm.
beginning N sound, but that's lots of times too, there might not be like an actual linking rule that applies there, but a native speaker just tries to smooth out that transition as best as possible. So it is linked, but
Hmm.
there's not like a rule that you can apply there. No way links up nicely.
Hmm.
You link that O sound in no with the beginning wa in way, and they one's a vowel, one's a consonant, but they have the similar lip position, no
Hmm.
way, so that links up
Hmm.
really nicely. There's no way we'll make it. So, the contraction wheel or will make it, that has that dark L sound in there, but when you link the dark L to the M in make, you kinda use, will make it. I continue with that dark
Hmm.
L sound, actually, tongue
Hmm.
tip down, will make it, and I'm
Hmm.
reducing that word quite a bit to just
Hmm.
wool, will make
Hmm.
it, tongue tip down, dark L, but that voicing is consistent. You keep the
Hmm.
voice going,
Hmm.
and then you just kinda link it right up to the M.
Hmm.
Let's see, make it back in time, so that has some nice linking some rules that
Hmm.
you can actually apply here.
Yeah,
Make
talk about those
it
K sounds. Yeah.
Yeah. So, make it back in.
Hmm.
So, the word make ends in the K, and then in begins with the vowel, and then back ends with the K, and in begins with a vowel. So you have some consonant to vowel linking that can happen. So the final K sound almost moves over to the beginning of the next word. It resyllabifies is kind of the technical term. You just change the syllable structure So make it, really what you're saying is make it, make it, make it. You
Mhm.
don't say make it, make it.
Mhm.
So the K is released, but it's released, as it begins the next word, and then you release it when you go into the vowel of the next word.
Mhm.
Same thing with back in, back in, back in.
Mhm.
That type of linking is generally easier for people to get, to understand once they hear it. They think, oh yeah, just move the K over and it
Mhm.
happens really naturally. You just have to learn the rule and hear it, and then people are
Mhm.
usually able to imitate that very quickly.
Mhm. Mhm. I see some people have asked us questions. We'll get to those in a moment. In this sentence, what is what would you say is the hardest? Like, if you gave this sentence to your students, where would you expect them to have the most trouble?
Ooh, okay. No
I
way.
already have ideas for me, but I want to hear what yours are.
Probably the word wheel, that
Mhm.
contraction. Contractions in general, I have found that most of my students will automatically pronounce them as the two
The
words,
full word.
the
Yep.
full words. Yeah.
Yep.
So
100%.
we
100%.
will, rather than wool.
And they don't even
That's
know
the
they're doing it.
reduced.
They don't even know they're
Right.
doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Super
same thing
common.
with theirs.
Mhm.
They might also say
Mhm.
there is, but
Mhm.
a native speaker, when they're reading the contraction, they'll pronounce it like a contraction.
Mhm.
Theirs. It's just one word.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Contractions. Again, if you're watching this and your goal is, not just sounding good, you're trying to get that real natural sound. You got to use contractions because in spoken English, they're just used all the time. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, like I can't tell you the last time I said like there is no way. That's hard to say. It's
Yeah,
physically hard to say. There's
that's
no way.
true. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why we have contractions, right? Contractions aren't meant to make your life harder, meant to make life easier. Just to
Hmm.
make it smoother. Um, you mentioned the wool, like we'll make it back. There's no way we'll make reducing that contraction, especially super difficult. I was thinking that was my second thing. I was looking at in because short eyes with ends they just butcher my
Oh,
students
back
so
in,
bad. Back in, you get like
back in time.
back in, or like the end sounds
Uh-huh.
super tense, like versus or like short eye to long eye. You like, for instance, the more in and things like that. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also the word in is a very common word. And so
mm-hmm,
you might, when you're studying and practicing this long I, the short I, the long E, and you might get it in some words. Okay, this has the short sound.
mm-hmm,
And then you see a word like in, and because it's just so common, I think it's easy to forget. Oh, this
mm-hmm,
also has that short sound, but
mm-hmm,
also that N sound too. Um, I find, yeah, I agree that my students tend to want to pronounce "een," and
mm-hmm,
also, when the short I is, follows an L, like,
mm-hmm.
okay,
Yeah,
this is
like
the
fill or like pill or things like that. Like
yeah, or like lizard. That was the first word
oh,
that popped
falls out.
into my
Yes.
head,
Mm-hmm,
but either
mm-hmm,
way, it's like I think it's the L sound as well. They'll want to pronounce it like
mm-hmm,
lizard, and it's
mm-hmm.
just the tongue position, and then
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah, makes it
there's
hard.
some consonants that I think have a huge impact on vowels that you just want to be mindful of. You want to be mindful of L's. You want to be mindful of N's. You want to be mindful of R's. Like if I had to pick three consonants that you want to be careful of around vowels, those would be probably the three I would pick because they can have a pretty big impact on how your vowel's going to sound.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
yeah. Okay, other things on this sentence. I think you guys hit.
There's no way.
We do have some things, some quick notes here. Held T in it, like make it back, make it
Ah,
back. I
yes.
think I would personally probably hold it in most situations, make it back. It's physically hard to say make it back versus make it
Make
back.
it back. Yeah,
Yeah.
it just
It's
it disrupts the flow of your speech
mhm,
so much. It feels, yeah, I don't, my mouth is
yeah,
like, "Don't do that."
yeah. Like
Yeah.
those true T sounds are just relatively rare in America, unless it's like at the start of a word.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just doesn't happen super often. Other things about this sentence. I see some other questions. We'll be back. Oh, back in time. Back in. Yeah. Can you reduce it to back in time? I'd be okay with that. I
Back in.
personally think of it back
Oh,
in
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Sure.
I think
Mhm.
that's fine. Um, okay. other questions that we see here. I think Denny's the first. Any situation where the ah sound gets dropped in an sound, like where the ah sound like becomes an sound, like cat becomes ket, or things like that. Denny, if you can give me some clarification, unless Julie, did you have any thoughts on that?
If that is what the question is about, if the ah sound just kind of reduces to sometimes, um, uh,
I can't think of an example. I'll be honest.
I can't think of one that would be like a rule, like it's
Fair.
common to do this. I think it might happen when a native speaker is not, maybe they're being lazy. Um, Maybe the word that, you know,
Mhm.
maybe if you're speaking really fast, that, but I wouldn't say that's like a rule that you should necessarily follow. I think it might just happen sometimes, but
I think it's kind of a risk. It's not like the ah sound versus the aw sound. There's with the vowel shift. There's some people. My wife's from the Midwest. She doesn't say law. She says la and things like that. And that's perfectly fine. There's no word where if you use an ah sound versus an aw sound, people get confused. But there are many, many words where if you use an sound as opposed to an ah sound, people may confuse that because
yes.
they are distinct sounds. You're not often going to see an ass sound that gets reduced. I would say so just kind of be careful with that.
Yeah.
Um,
Good point.
Going back to the first sentence, can what's your be reduced to what's sure? Yeah, I think that you have some flexibility, like whether you're using like a ch sound or more of an sh sound, like what sure versus what sure. I think honestly you'll hear, especially in rapid speech. I do think that's something you can encounter.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional thoughts on that?
What sure? What sure? That feels harder because you have
Feels
that
harder. Okay.
stop. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because it's not that you don't have that CH kind of connecting you there. You have a
Mhm.
kind of a stop
Mhm.
SH. But I agree. It might happen in fast speech. A native
Mhm.
speaker, they might take some liberties with how, what they're pronouncing, or just kind of
Mhm.
be maybe just kind of just lazy, not
Mhm.
lazy speech, but
Mhm.
just imprecise. It
Yeah.
might happen.
I mean, let's be honest. If you have the phrase like "What's your name?" Hey, what's your name? That what's your is going to be super fast. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Other things. The beta mentioned. It's interesting. You mentioned personality for stress. Of course. Yes, personality. I think will have
Oh,
a pretty big impact on that. I think that's fair.
yeah.
Man, we have another question here. How can I improve American accent with air placement? I mean, we could spend hours on this. Initial thoughts for you, Julie. Did you have any initial comments about
With
air placement?
air placement. So is that, I don't know if they're referring to kind of just overall like voice placement,
That's how I'm
that kind
interpreting
of
it.
okay, okay. Well, I placement for me, I feel like it's like a more abstract kind of
Mm,
thing to discuss. It's real. I mean, it is a thing that American placement is maybe different than other languages. That's true. Um, I feel like the American English sound is relaxed. It's kind of a lower, relaxed sound. Not every speaker, but for the most part. And so, yeah, if you feel like you have a native language that has a more higher placement or a nasally placement or a frontal placement or even kind of just trapped in the back of the mouth, um, just trying to do exercises to kind of relax the
mhm,
mouth, relax the voice, and try to balance the sound between the mouth and the throat.
mhm.
So if you feel like there's some tension somewhere, trying to do some relaxation. It's hard if we can't hear your voice, and kind of know what kind of cues to give you. But generally speaking, just relaxing, opening,
Yeah.
um, and more airflow maybe
And but
compared to
by the
other
way, we're
languages.
saying relax, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Okay,
Oh,
because
right. Yeah.
it's the hardest
Yeah.
relaxing you may
Trying to
be.
think of another word.
No, but it's. I mean, I run into the same thing with students. Is that you use this word relax, and people are thinking beaches and lying down, but it's like no, like we're trying to talk about getting things lower without being restricted. We're not trying to restrict air, and
Right. Yeah.
actually, I have a video recently. If you look, it's called just like breathing techniques for placement. There's lots of things you kind of need to be aware of. Your posture affects your sound. So, for instance, if you make like a long I sound, I'll do a quick demonstration. Like if you have a long I, like an E sound, and you just raise your shoulders and then lower them, the quality of your sound changes. Like E, like the sound is not staying constant. There are slight modifications to it. So talking American English, it can help if you keep your shoulders down a little bit, have some good posture.
Mhm.
It can help also pushing your tongue farther forward. So, for instance, having there are many, there's textbook ways to make sounds, but then there's the kind of like the quote unquote actual way people make sounds. And, mouth position has a little bit more flexibility, in my opinion, than people sometimes give it credit for. You can push, for instance, the tip of your tongue down for a lot of sounds and still be able to achieve them for the most part. So sometimes having some contact with the very tip of your tongue in the bottom of your mouth, kind of by your bottom front tooth, can be very helpful just for opening things in the back. If I send my tongue farther this way, then it's all connected. So if I pull the rope, then that means there's less of it back here. So it's like
Mhm.
we moving around your tongue a little bit, moving a little farther forward, can help open things up in the back and in the throat a little bit to let more air through. I think both of us have videos on placement, so I would say check those out. Those have exercises that you can try, experiment, get comfortable, try to get an idea of what the placement is for your language. What I see with I think a lot of languages, for instance, European languages tend to be kind of high, top of the throat, back of the mouth, or even forward in the mouth and things like that. For instance, take a sound that your language has that English has, like for instance, a long I sound, like again, E. Most languages have that, but what's the difference between them? Like, is your E sounding like mine, like E, or does it sound more like E, or does it sound more like E? Like, where are you producing that sound from? Getting an idea of
Mhm.
that, and then moving it around to different places. Just
Mhm.
it's a hard thing again without hearing you to kind of, I don't know where your placement is right now because I'm not, I don't have a file, um, but I would say check out our resources.
Yeah.
You know, um,
And another thing I like to tell my students too is like, what does it sound like when a native speaker of American English speaks your native language,
that's well.
and you hear them,
Hmm.
like, if you were to describe their voice, I mean, you can talk about the pronunciation, maybe their accent isn't, just like a native, but also what does their voice sound like? Does it
Hmm.
sound kind of nasally? Does it sound like it's really deep? And that's kind of, if it sounds that way, that's probably what I should do in English. When I speak American English, that's gonna be the placement of American English, because I would probably naturally just carry over my American English placement into Spanish,
Hmm.
which would not be correct. I would have to kinda change, but I bet you a native Spanish speaker would hear it in my speech right away.
Hmm.
"Ah, you sound like you're from the US," and then, "Well, why?" And then
Hmm.
try to think about what makes me sound like I'm from the US. That's probably the placement.
That's a great. I really like that. Yeah. So like trying to imitate how people who speak your target language speak your first language. I think that's a great kind of
Mhm.
strategy. Try to get their accent in your own language. Yeah, I think that's very fair. Yeah. Lots of nice things. Than and then. Then sounds like than. Yeah, so like this kind of goes back to Denny's question earlier about the S sound and the A sound. They're distinct sounds. They're different sounds. So these are different words. You don't want to confuse than and then. Um, other things too. Hi. And also from Ahmed as well. Hi. That's great. Yeah. And Jamie, yeah, if you have some other questions about that, let me know. It's a huge concept. It's hard to, I mean, we could spend classes on that. Which we do
Mhm. Yeah.
with our students. Okay, so we looked our two sentences, which is great, but you guys didn't just come here to, hear us talk about them. You want to get feedback for yourselves, which means that it is now time. Oh, let me add myself there, right? Again, it's not little, it's more little.
The G host was class.
Are you feeling that here, here, or here? Okay, so we are now going to be listening to your audio files. You see, I already have my headphones on, so I'm already ready. You guys sent us a lot of files. I will be honest. I have to go in about 50 minutes. Julie, I don't want to keep her super long either. She's very nice enough to join us. So we're going to get through as many as we can. And of course, if you have questions and things like that as we go through these, be sure to let me know. But hopefully, even if we don't get to your audio files, you're still able to kind of take things away from this that you can apply to your own speech. Because I think even just hearing other people's listening to feedback for other people can also be helpful feedback for yourself. I think with pronunciation. So to answer your question, Mr. Go Big, are we going to be able to get through all of them today? I don't want to bet, but if I were a betting person, my guess would be no. But we'll get through as many as we can. That's my guarantee.
We'll try.
Yes. Let me share my screen and my sound so everyone can see this. Okay. Give me one moment. Oh, and by the way, pull this up as well. Okay, so I'm just going to go kind of in the order of how we received these files. We'll listen to them. We'll give as best feedback as we can, then we'll move on. And of course, again, if you guys have questions, let us know. All right, Julie, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's take a listen to the first one here.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Okay. Can you hear that okay, Julie?
I can.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to play it one more time.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Okay, so working on this sentence here. I'll play it one more time. Let's see what's standing out.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
What's your name? What's your name again? What's your name? What's your name again? Okay, let's maybe. I'm kind of hearing two thought groups. I'm not sure if you are, but I'm hearing like, can you remind me? Pause.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Slight pause. Okay, so let's maybe start with the first half.
Can you remind me what?
Can you remind me? Can you remind me? One thing is, I don't necessarily want to say like I'm hearing something wrong, but what I don't know if if you heard this in conversation, I don't know if you would hear people saying this sentence in the exact same way because of I think the intonation sounds a little off to me.
Can you remind me what?
Like, can you remind me? Can you remind me? Like, if I were saying this sentence, I wouldn't say it like that. Like, can you remind me? Like, can you remind me? Can you remind me? Like, I think it might be on the remind.
Can you remind me what?
Can you remind me? Can you remind me? Can you remind me? Can you remind me? Like, how do I don't know if you're getting what I'm saying. Something to me sounds a little bit off.
Yeah, no, I hear it too. And it's not like it's the intonation to me sounds a little different than how I would pronounce it, probably. Although it doesn't sound like
It's not
incorrect,
wrong.
like you're saying. It's
Yeah.
not wrong because intonation, there's lots of ways to do it. There's lots of right ways to do it. So, can you remind me? Can you remind me? Can you remind me? Can you remind me?
And the way you just
Yeah.
did it
Can you
sounds
remind me?
like it's a can you remind me? Like it's a remind or remind. I think that
Yeah.
remind like I think I would recommend having a higher pitch on the my, but a sharper falling intonation. Like, can you remind me? Can you remind me? I think to me that would make it sound a little smoother.
Can you remind me?
Can you
Yeah.
remind me? Yeah, and I would probably start higher. The pitch of, can you remind me? Can you remind me? I probably was overall start higher at the beginning of the sentence rather than da 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 da, rather than coming up to it. I probably would start higher and then go down.
That's actually a pretty common strategy. You'll see with questions is whatever is starting your question word, like whatever question word you have at the beginning, sometimes starting at a slightly higher pitch and then dropping and then going back up for later. I think it's a pretty common strategy. You'll see with questions.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
What's your name again? What's your name? I think stresses.
Remind me what's your name again?
Name again. So I feel like you gave me a head fake. Like you made it sound like you were gonna have the heaviest stress on name.
Remind me what's your name again?
But then you added another stress. You put a second stress for me on again. What's your name again? I would cut one of those out. I would make either Like if the again part is what you think is really important, then make name a little weaker, and vice versa. If name, and if I were saying a sentence, name for me would probably be the more likely stress. If name is your stress, keep that, but then weaken the again, because I think right now it's really strong, so it kind of catches your listener a little off guard.
Remind me what's your name again?
What are your
Mhm.
thoughts on that, Julie?
I agree. Yeah, the upward intonation on again is the first thing I heard when I heard this full
Mhm.
sentence,
Mhm.
and I thought, oh, it stood out to me as feeling a little unnatural, and also because what's your name again? Kind of at the WH question. So typically that would kind of go down at the end anyway. What's your name again?
Mhm.
What time is it? Where are you going? Those would have more typical downward intonation at the end. So it feels more natural to me to have, yeah, again, going down. Can you remind me what's your name again? What's your name again?
Yeah, can you
And
remember what's
again,
your name again?
name would have the highest pitch, would have the stress, and then again would go down in intonation.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of that, just in terms of like the pitches on, like name again,
Name again?
name again. Like notice that climb, like name, then going down, and then going back up again, like name again. Versus, I would have gone down, 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 like name again, name again, name again.
Mhm.
And this is something I'd love to know your thoughts on this. This is actually it's not a video I've made yet, but it's a video that's coming up soon. Is talking about pitches, and I think my students aren't using enough of them. I think a lot of my students are kind of stuck in this, like maybe like 3 to 4 pitch range. They have their bass. They know they need to go up. They know they need to go down. But what they're not doing is they don't go to extra step down, or they don't go to
Mhm.
extra step up. So if you're only operating on 3 pitches, that's fine. It works, but it can make you sound flat, can make you sound monotone, can make you sound like you're missing out on some of the
Yeah.
extra emotion. So being willing, especially on reduced phrases. It's like name again. It's like again, again. I would really recommend playing with again. It's okay to make both of those syllables at the same pitch, but for experimenting, for playing around, for trying new things, I would say try to take them a step lower. Again. Don't have them at the same pitch level, go a little bit lower, just to kind of expand your range a little bit. Other things kind of standing out to you from this audio file? I could play it again too.
Yeah. One more time.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Not sure. So I heard a couple of like good things there too, like the whatcher. I'm pretty sure I heard whatcher, so I heard
Yeah,
a good
some linking
reduction
going on.
there. Might have heard another reduction on you. It might have been a yeah. Can you remind me? Possibly. Um, what's your name again?
Yeah.
So those were good things. So I want to point out, oh yeah, I liked that reduction
sure.
and that link that happened there.
Yeah, I think what kind of summarizes it for me is that I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong. People understand clarity is fine. You got some linking going on. You got your vowel sounds and things like that. In terms of getting to more natural flow, I would say pay attention to stresses, and things like that. Yeah. Next one. Thanks for sending that file. I'm sure I think that was you. But regardless, thanks for sending that file. We do appreciate it. Take a listen to our second one.
Can you remind me what's your name again? Can you remind me what's your name again?
Things are jumping out at you. I'll play it one more time.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Name again. So again, we have that upward intonation at the end of again. Can you remind me what's your name again? So hearing that intonation pattern, I might use something like that too. Can you remind me what's your name again? If I can imagine a situation where maybe I'm trying to be really polite, or I'm like, oh, I forgot your name and I'm embarrassed. So I'm like kind of asking you this question in like a really easy, like I don't want to be really loud about it. I want to be kind of quiet. Can you remind me what's your name again? Almost like I'm asking for permission. Is this okay that I'm asking you for your name again?
Yeah.
So that is different than the the first recording we heard,
Yeah.
where the intonation was just a little different from the beginning, so it created a different story in my mind. But this one, it reminded me of that situation where I'm kind of like, oh, I'm a little embarrassed. Can you remind me what's your name again? Then I might use an upward intonation just for that reason. So
That's fair.
first thing.
That's fair.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
I want to highlight that linking going on at the first part.
Can you remind me?
Can you remind me? Like, I'm personally okay with that. I think this is sort of linking that a lot of people who learn English aren't necessarily doing. Like, I think there's a lot. You're really weakening your consonant sounds a lot here.
Can you remind me what?
Can you remind me? Like, that N in like "can you" is almost completely gone. Like, can you remind me? And that's not a bad thing. I don't personally think that's a bad thing. I think in rapid speech, that is something you'll hear. So I'm personally okay with that.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Remind me what's your name again? But it's kind of interesting. So like the can you remind me that I like that linking.
Can you remind me what's your name?
What's your? But the what's your? So it's like I think some of the linking is very natural sound, especially for rapid speech in the beginning. But then the what's your? I don't think you're as likely to hear that. It's one of those cases where it's not wrong, but I do think you're going to be more likely to get like more of that what's your than the what's your. That S sounds pretty clear.
Remind me what's your name again?
Like what's your name again? What's your name again? But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? To me, that I think that's going to be less common.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably less likely that you'll hear that TS, what's your. I mean, you can. There's no rule that says you must make it a CH sound to link it together. But probably more likely that you'll hear that what's your instead to kind of link it together because it's just a little bit easier to say. And yeah, I think if that the beginning part of the sentence, can you remind me? Yeah, it's a little kind of that linking that's happening in the reductions, a little less precise than maybe the first recording, or but it's not. I think in the context of a conversation, yeah, if you're kind of, can you remind me? It reminds me of that kind of a facial expression. Can you remind me what's your name again?
Yeah,
I
think
like
it's very
again,
conversational.
embarrassed. Yeah, that you're like, oh, I forgot.
Which is great because that's I don't know about your students, but I think for my students, that's kind of the pronunciation that they often are working towards. It's hard.
Sure. Yeah.
Using those linkings and things like that. Not for a lot of people who learn English, you're less likely to find it. So that I really. And I think that's why the what's your stands out to me more because it's like, okay, so you have like this massive linking and reduction going on in the first half. Cool. I like it. I'm there for it. I support it. Cool. But it feels like, we did all this effort here. So then why didn't we do it in the others? It feels inconsistent, so like, because I feel like in some ways, like the what's your is probably the linking I would expect even more than the, like, can you remind me, like, than like dropping the N or weakening the N. In a lot of ways. So I feel like if you're doing the first part, I would then expect you to do the second part. So then when that second part doesn't appear, I'm a little bit confused. Personally. Yeah. And Emmanuel has his defense. Thought it would be too mushy, so I didn't reduce it to sound. Got you.
Oh.
I think you can get away with being mushy because also keep in mind stress. Your stress isn't coming in until you remind what's your name. So you pretty much have one stress. Your stress is pretty much name. And one thing that, Joe, I'd love your thoughts on this too. One thing I tell my students is our goal in my classes is we're not trying to get perfect pronunciation. We're kind of trying to do the opposite. Because if you pronounce things perfectly, you're going to sound like a robot, or it's just not going to sound natural at all. So it's in all honesty, reductions are kind of, I don't know, in my opinion, are kind of fun because all those rules and things you learn about pronunciation, I don't want to say like you get rid of them, but if you're reducing a word, they become so weak that in a lot of ways they don't, as long as your stressed word is really clear, everything else, you can kind of, you do your best, you say it, but it's not super important as the stressed word. Like, can you remember what's your name again? Can you remember what's your, if I just walked up to you, Julian, I was like, can you remember, you'd be like, what did you say? But if I said, can you remind me what's your name again? Now you'd be like, oh, can you remind me? Yeah, you would get it, So So
Yeah.
I think as
Yeah.
long as name is stressed, I think you'll be okay. I wouldn't be too worried about that mushiness
Yeah.
personally. Yeah. Other thoughts on that one?
Just when you're talking about reductions, and yeah, it's a balance. It's a balance between sounding natural and sounding clear. I mean, and so yeah, so some non-native speakers might err on the side of being as clear as
Hmm.
possible, but then that
Hmm.
that can be just as equally as hard to understand
Yes.
as someone who is way too, I guess, mushy in their
Hmm.
speech.
Hmm.
If you're very, very clear, that means you don't have good rhythm, you don't have good linking, you're not smooth, and that leaves your listener waiting for each word you're saying, and
Yeah,
it's harder for the brain to process
it does.
individual words rather than an entire phrase or an entire sentence that's linked together. So I'll hear individual words, and I have to work harder to understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
Actually, if you're too clear when you're speaking,
That's a
it
big
can.
problem. Hindi speakers, Tamil speakers, a lot of my Indian language groups and things like that tends to be a big problem. Like the consonants, like the syllables tend to be super clear, but because the rhythm is so different, it can take people a couple of times to understand what's being said.
Mm.
That's something I see a lot. Um, I'll put it this way and I'm going to guess that your experience is very similar, Julie, but I have never had a student who was so heavy on reductions that I didn't understand them. But almost all of my students, I can tell you, pronounce things very clearly. I don't have trouble understanding what they're saying, you know?
Hmm.
So I think if you're watching this video, whether right now or in the stream or in the replay, like most likely your goal isn't just to sound clear, because you're probably already there. Your goal is probably like, how do I get sounding natural? And if your goal is to really get sounding natural, that's where these reductions and things like that, you really need to start experimenting some more.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I agree. I've never worked with someone who has used too many reductions,
I've
right?
never
It's
heard it.
usually the
Never
opposite.
heard
Yeah,
it.
that's a really good point. Um, and uh, and I think using these kind of reductions, and even if you learn the rules, you learn the typical reductions, and then you might hear in a native speaker, oh, they reduced it even more, or there's even more
Yeah.
reductions. It
Hmm.
feels unnatural. That can't be right. But really, if you can identify that in a native speaker's speech, oh, I hear that they're reducing the word can even more, then you should do it too. If you're able to hear it and identify it, then just imitate it and just
Yeah.
do it, and think, okay, this feels weird, this
Hmm.
feels strange, but the native speakers are doing it. Let me see if I can do it too and
Yeah.
figure out when to use it in my speech.
Yeah.
So right, yeah, you're probably too clear. You're too
Mm.
much on that end. Let's see if we can shift you more to being more natural, which
Mhm.
would mean to use more
Yeah.
reductions.
Yeah. It might sound contradictory to your goals, but in honesty, I think it will bring you closer to what you're looking for. You know,
Hmm.
um, we do have this question here. Mushy as in slurred. Yeah, at least when I'm referring mushy, slurred in the sense of like, especially like consonant sounds becoming so weak that the words almost kind of lose their backbone to a degree. Again, let me play this audio for the first part.
Can you remind me what
Can you remind me? Can you remind me? Can you remind me? That's slurred. I would say that's mushy to a degree. That's the word we're using. Yeah. Um, yeah. Other comments on this audio.
Um, just another comment on this question too, like mushy
Mhm.
as in slurred. So you might not. It's good to know when to use this kind of really reduced
Mm,
speech and when not to use it. I mean, you don't want to
yes.
always, if you were going in for a job interview, you're not going to probably say, "Can you remind me?" Or something like. You're probably going to maybe be a little bit more clear, but still natural. So it's a range. It's
Mhm.
not it's a spectrum. It's not like black and white. So there's all this middle area. So it's good to know, well, when should I kind of have these more reductions in my speech, in conversations with your friends, really informal things. And
Mhm.
then sometimes you want it still be natural, but maybe shift to be a little bit more precise with your articulation, but still link and still use reductions. So this audio file is great. If I was having a conversation with this person, it would feel very natural to hear this phrase, this sentence exactly that way.
Mhm.
You know, it sounds natural to me.
Mhm.
But in other settings, it might not be. It might not
Yeah.
be the best choice of pronunciation. So it's good to know that you need to learn both, so you can kind of choose which style to use depending on the context.
Yeah, I think it's very fair. I think that for the majority of people watching this right now, you're probably in the camp where if you had to give a meeting tomorrow, you'd probably be fine. The English you're using is probably already pretty good for that, or like for speeches and things like that. A lot of things that we're mentioning now are more for, you don't just want to sound good in the meeting. You want to sound good, when you go to the happy hour after work or something like that. Things
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
Wanting to have fun with friends,
Yeah.
being very casual. Yeah. It's different styles of speaking
Mhm.
for different groups of people,
Yeah.
different contexts.
All right. Oh man, we're at the rate we're going, we'll get through 5. So we're gonna
Oh
try
no.
to.
Should we speed it up a little bit?
We'll try to. But I mean,
I don't
but
know how
again,
many there are.
I think the things that we're doing, though, I think this is applicable to a wide range of people. So I don't think there's an issue with that. But let's hear this next
Can
one.
you remind me what's your name again?
I'll play again.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
I'll play it one more time.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Initial thoughts on that?
Name again?
If you need me to play again, let me know.
Yeah, but one more time, please.
Yes.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Okay, so I think I heard some good linking in there too. I mean, can you remind me what's your name again? I'm not sure what's your name again if there was a CH there, but I heard something that sounded like a CH linking that together.
Mhm.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Play it again.
Again, yeah.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
What's your
That part
what's
does
your-
stand out, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Play again.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Maybe there was like less of a T sound? What's your name again? What's your
Yeah, that's because originally I was thinking. I think it's standing out also because of pitch.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Can you remind me what's your? Do you
What's
hear
your
that
name
jump?
again?
Can you remind me
Yeah.
Can you remind me what's your?
Can you- what's
Can you
your
remind me
name
what's
again?
your? I think maybe that pitch may have gone a little high.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
What's your? But it's also it's not quite an S, but it's almost not like CH either. It's like
Can you remind me what's your name?
it's like what's your?
What's
It's like
your-
what's your? So it's like almost
Yeah.
like removing the T and then starting with an S that then morphs into an SH. It's like
Yeah.
what's sure?
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
sure?
Can you remind me what's your name?
And I think that in general, I would have committed to something. I would have either committed to. I probably would have committed to SH, like what's your name, instead of what's your or what's your name, what's your name, instead of having that S that kind of slides into it. But that's my thoughts. The other thing again I would say is pitch.
Can you remind me what's your name?
Can you remind me what's your? Can you remind me what's your? Versus can you remind me what's your name again? Can you remind me what's your? I would have probably kept it maybe a little flatter, or even potentially even gone down, because I don't want it to sound stressed. Once you start raising pitches, you're kind of indicating to your listener that you're stressing something, but it's not quite what we're doing here.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Yeah, I would have really curious to hear this again with a lower pitch wush, and instead of a wush, more wush. Like, can you remind me what's your name again? Can you remind me what's your name again? I think that would have made it sound even more natural. Honestly. Yeah. We'll play again. Other things.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
What's your name again?
What's your name again? And just while we're kind of on the topics of like kind of intonation, kind of had that upward. So the way that this speaker kind of linked that full phrase, now it becomes a yes, no question, kind of because it starts with can you, yes or no. So it has that upward intonation. So it's kind of, so I kind of liked that. I guess it kind of fits with the mold of a yes, no question, because it was more like one phrase. I think that first one we listened to was kind of more separated. And that's why it sounded like yes, no, and then a WH, but now it's kind of one yes, no question. So what's your name again? And it's like a polite way to ask, can you remind me what's your name again? Rather than just saying, what's your name again? You're asking it a more polite way. Can you remind me what's your name again?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So I thought that was appropriate for
Yeah.
this, the way that it was all linked together and into
Mhm.
one phrase.
Yeah. I think this sounds really clear. I think this sounded pretty good. My biggest thing is play around with that what's your. You made the comment about sounding like a robot. I don't think this sounds. I don't think this sounds robotic. I don't get that feel.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
I think you have enough range of pitches that it avoids that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So, Rumeza, you're safe. I do not believe you're a bot, or if you are a bot, saying that you're not a bot. I believe you that you're not a bot. Yeah, but I think it sounds pretty good actually. I'm pretty happy with that. Play around with that middle part with the what and the linking there. But thank you for sending that file. Let's take a listen to our next one.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Okay, I already have some ideas of what I want to say. Play again.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Initial impressions.
The overall rate, is a little on the slow side, I think. So some words were kind of held out a little too long in duration.
Mhm.
So it kind of made it seem a little unnatural. I kind of was like, what are you? Oh, kind of waiting for the next word to
Mhm.
come. And then also the overall intonation and the pitch. Some of the words sounded a little monotonous on certain words. So maybe could have had a little bit more pitch change on the stressed words.
Yeah.
So I think I heard like remind was the duration was held out, which is one way to indicate stress, duration of the vowel, you hold it out, but also the pitch should have gone up a little bit on that word. And then I think also name maybe was held out a little longer, but then there was no change in pitch.
Yeah. I'll play again.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
I feel like I'm going to the DMV or the BMV and
Yeah, it
someone
seems,
thinks
yeah,
like a
there's
million clients. I'm customer number 1033 for the
Yeah.
day. They're just trying to
Yeah.
leave. It's 5:00.
Yeah, they're just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
I don't want to be here.
which kind of goes back to earlier about personality and things like that in context. This reading it this way could work in the right context, but I don't know if you're giving off the feel that you want to be giving off, because again, this gives off the feeling kind of like what Julie mentioned. You sound bored, you sound uninterested, you sound like you're just trying to get through the day.
Can you remind me what?
Can you remind me, especially dragging out that mind? Okay, so as mentioned, but you're probably dragging out remind a little bit too long. Like, can you remind me more? Can you remind me? Can you remind me? Just because the word is stressed and you do hold it a little longer doesn't mean you have to expand it too much. It's a little bit too exaggerated. And then we get that again at the end as well.
Remind me what's your name again?
What's your name again? Versus what's your name again? I think the biggest piece of advice here is stressed words, don't hold them out so long. You can shorten the length a little bit. I think that'll have a pretty big impact. The other thing too, so if we want this to sound more enthusiastic, potentially to have a little bit more energy, how would you do that? Let me play again.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Any suggestions for adding some energy here?
Can you remind me? One thing, if changing the pitch of your voice feels really unnatural, and for some people it is, for some people it's just like it's hard to do. If you practice, so it requires that you sort of become an actor, and kind of pretend that you're going to be this like really energetic person. Maybe choose someone, an actor or a scene from a movie or a TV show where there's a character who's really has lots of energy, and pretend you're that person and watch a few scenes from that person, and then start to use some facial expressions. So that's one trick. If changing the pitch of your voice is really hard, when you're telling stories to somebody and you're telling a really scary story or talking about a dream you had that was really scary or really funny, typically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be changing your eyebrows and opening your eyes, and the pitch of your voice typically kind of follows. It mirrors kind of what your face is doing, or even using hand gestures. If you bring your hands up, lots of times your eyebrows follow, and things move. Maybe I find that happens.
I'm too conscious.
It could be that we're trying not to show too much expression. I don't know, but I found that if you kind of free yourself to kind of like, okay, let me move my hands a little bit, And that maybe will help your voice to also change because, it's kind of tied together. Your hands are moving, your face will move with it. And then once that happens, your voice might also follow,
Mhm.
or you might find it the other direction. But if you want to make this more energetic, choose an energetic person to imitate, watch that movie, watch that TV show, watch the YouTube clip, and then kind of act. So it requires that you act a little bit, but by yourself in the bathroom. No one has to be there. But try to incorporate facial expressions with it to see if you can get your voice to follow.
I think that's great. Yeah, I often say when you learn another language, your personality does change. So I mean, there's literal studies that talk about this stuff. I think those are all great suggestions. You know, also, I think it's easy to think again about pitches, again raising pitches, but also lowering pitches. There are actually surprised some places here where you actually could have actually gone lower.
Can you remind me what
Can you remind me? Like you could have gone up a little lower on the U if you wanted.
your name
Um,
again?
what's your name? You could have gone lower on the again things too. So like again, you want to have a wider variety of pitch because right now you're kind of staying a little bit constrained. So just having as much variety as you can. Playing around with volume, playing around with speed, things like that. Don't stay at the same level for every word because it's going to make it sound less natural. All right, but thank you for sending that audio. Let's take a listen to our next one. Here.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
Take a look at our second sentence. Okay. Listen to that again.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
There's no way. It sounds a little flat to me.
There's no way we'll make.
Which, I mean, could work. Maybe you're really depressed by the situation. Like, oh, we're going to miss our flight. There's no way we'll make it. Like, maybe you're in the right situation. That certainly could work. But I'm imagining that we're trying to imagine a more neutral or kind of standard situation.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
I would have considered raising the pitch a little bit on way. There's no way. Or if you want to stress no, raising the pitch on no a little higher.
There's no way.
There's no way. Kind of staying around the same level. Versus there's no way. Or there's no way. You even doing little things like that could have helped a little bit to make it sound flatter. Or to avoid sounding flatter. The other thing.
No way we'll make it back in time.
Make it back in time. Putting stress on time, it can work. I think you're more likely to put the stress on back. I don't think you're as likely to put the stress in time here, personally. Other thoughts on that, Julie? Other things stand out to you here?
Yeah, I agree about the intonation, the pitch change on no way. And so I heard, for the stress, I heard longer duration, I heard bigger volume, a greater volume. Just the pitch change would have been nice to kind of make it stand out. And I tend to I like voices that have more variety in the pitch. So, it might be a difference between a man and a woman or, between genders, kind of who uses pitch more than others. But I tend to favor for both male and female voices I like pitch change as a way to indicate stress. So to me, that sounds exciting because pitch really is how you add excitement and emotion to your voice. It's one of the key ways to do it. So yeah, I would agree with that. And also, you had the speaker had good stress on those words, but you could also make the unstressed words even shorter. So, if adding stress, you can also the flip side of that is what should you unstress or what should you de-stress? So, like the word theirs, you could have made it a little shorter, and we'll could have made that a little shorter, could have reduced it more, and that would have helped, the stressed words to stand out even more. Just by shrinking the words around it. So that could have helped with the rhythm too.
Yeah. Those are all good points. Marcus, I think that was your audio. Thanks for sending that, man. Again, everything's really clear. These are just some things to make it sound a little bit more expressive. And I've heard your audios, Marcos. I know that you can exaggerate and things like that. So, use it here too. I totally know you can. Just want to do a quick pause for a moment because we did get a couple questions that I want to make sure we have time for. Okay. Let's see. A question here from Mary. When do we use uptalk? Any thoughts on
Is it
uptalk?
healthy at all? Uptalk. This is kind of a I don't know if it's a controversial topic. I don't know.
Ooh, let's get into this.
Is it
Yes.
controversial? It depends on who you talk to. And I guess, it's controversial in that I think because women maybe use it more than men. And so women get the blame for this uptalk, this epidemic of uptalk. But men use it as well. So I hear it in both. And I hear for me, it's more of a generational thing. So I hear more
Mm.
younger speakers using it than older speakers. But
Can you give us an example?
oh, of course. So uptalk is when you kind of raise the pitch of your voice at the end
Mhm.
of lots of words or at the end of your phrase or end of your sentence.
Familiar with like a
Yeah.
Valley Girl accent's probably
Yeah,
a
da da
little
da da,
often,
da da da
yeah,
da da.
associated with.
So it's just chronically going up when you don't need to. And we all do it a little bit, but it's when you do it a lot. You do it every time you speak or on every word or at the end of every sentence. That's when it starts to stand out to your listener and you lose credibility. You sound like you're not sure of yourself. You sound like you're asking a question all the time.
Mhm.
Am I really saying the right thing? And maybe so is it healthy at all? I think is what it's the second part of
That's one
that
of the
question,
questions,
is
yeah.
it healthy at all? Okay, yeah, you can use it when maybe you have more to say. You're saying a really long phrase or many sentences and lots of thoughts in your head, and there's more, so you're gonna keep going up because you're not done talking. Maybe, but that won't be your full conversation. That might just be a few sentences of your
Yeah.
conversation, then you'll end it. So it can be used, and it all depends on the context as well. But so who are you talking to? It's a
Mm.
way to kind of to express an opinion, but if you don't want to do it very forcefully, maybe, you could kind of come up at the end to just, yeah, I'm just making a suggestion here. I don't want to come off as rude or bossy, and those are loaded terms as well that's why this could be kind of controversial. But so there's ways to use it. But I would recommend if you're in that habit of going up at the end of everything you're saying, I would say don't do it. In general, don't do it. Because because then it just makes you seem unsure of yourself. And then people start to notice it. And then they think, it can, people can be kind of turned off by that,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think.
I think one situation you see it a lot is it can make things sound a little bit nicer and a little politer.
Yeah.
Like if the example I often give is like if you call a doctor's office and the receptionist picks up the phone, you're like, doctor's office. That's there's nothing wrong with that, but it sounds a little cold. Whereas if they pick up the phone, they're like, doctor's office, like office, doctor's office, like things like that. It does soften things you're saying. So when used correctly, it certainly can be um, a way to make things sound a little friendlier, but naturally it
Yeah.
can be overapplied.
Yeah, that's a great point. It softens thing. It invites the listener to make it's almost
Yeah.
like you're
Mhm.
asking them, can you
Mhm.
please comment on what I'm saying? You're like
Exactly.
doctor's office,
Mhm.
that person is asking you to please introduce yourself and
Mhm.
ask me what you want. So yeah, it softens things. So it depends on if that's what you want. But
Mhm.
if you're in like a
Mhm.
meeting and you have an opinion and you want people to listen to you, I would
Mhm.
say, at that point, don't use it
Yeah.
because you're trying to portray a different emotion or a different
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's one last question here. Did I see? Big one. Okay, where you put accents or I'm guessing stress in a sentence normally. Um, content words.
Okay.
Most again, imagining a sentence exists in a vacuum where there's no context or anything. Most likely, your stress is going to fall on whatever your last major noun, verb, adjective, or even adverb is. That's kind of like the textbook place where you would put it.
Mhm.
But again, this is no context. And the reality is that it's almost useless to say that because context determines everything. Um, in general, if you have a subject verb object situation, you would expect the object to receive the stress. In general, verbs don't usually get stressed because they're usually appearing earlier in your thought group. Okay, so usually they're not really in a position to receive it unless it's something you want to emphasize. Subjects, same thing. You're not usually going to stress the subject, even though those are nouns, unless you really want to emphasize it. But again, all of this goes with a very huge asterisk that context determines everything.
Yes.
Other comments about stress?
It's really fun to talk about, but it's so challenging to teach because yeah, you have this rule. It's typically the last content word of that phrase or sentence will get the most stress. You might have some secondary stress on other content words, maybe not, depending on the sentence. But then, you know, the speaker always can decide which word they want to stress depending on the intended message. And it's I think it's speakers who are really interesting and exciting play around with stress quite a bit. With stress and rate of speech and intonation, they're not following these typical rules all the
Yeah.
time. Lots of
Yeah.
times they are, but lots of time, most of the time they're not.
Yeah.
Because they're infusing emotion in their speech, so they're going to choose different words because they're trying to tell you something else, not just the words themselves.
If your stresses become predictable, something's not right.
Yeah.
They shouldn't. It shouldn't be something regular. It shouldn't turn into like a sing-song kind of pattern or things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. The English does not like when things are too regular. Okay. Let's do this. We're about at like the 10-minute mark-ish. Oh, whoops. Press the wrong button. Sorry, you're back. So we're going to do two things, Julie. I want to give you a chance to kind of talk about, you're doing this like conversation thing. Can you kind of tell us about how that works like for your lessons and things?
Oh yeah. So it's called Julie's Conversation Club. So it's a place for it's open to everyone. I have anybody can join, and it's a place for you to come to the lesson. It's about an hour long once a week, and I start by giving a quick lesson on any topic. So I published a schedule of topics, but you're more than welcome to suggest topics. Maybe you want to talk about linking. Maybe you want to talk about intonation, stress, or let's talk about the T sound. It could be anything related to pronunciation. I'll create a lesson on it and then give the lesson. And then with typically there's maybe 20 minutes left over, half an hour. And then everybody has a chance to practice their pronunciation with me and ask questions. You can also ask questions. Oh, I heard this word this week. Can you help me pronounce it? Sure. So it's kind of this open forum, like an open class. I give a mini lesson and then we practice.
Cool. And you said it's $5 a month.
$5 a month.
So reasonable.
And if you can't make it to the live meeting, that's okay. I record everything and then I send out the replay to everyone who has an active subscription. So you're more than welcome. You can download those videos or do whatever you want with them. Keep them and watch them over and over again if you want. That's no problem at all.
So, okay, let's enter our blitz mode. I'm going to play audio files. The very first thing that hits you, let me know. Maybe we can take turns. So I'll play an audio file. I'll go first, then I'll play another one, and then you can go, and then things like that. We'll try to knock out as many as we can. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
All right, let me bring everything back. We're back here. Okay. I'll go first. I think this is the one we just heard.
There's no.
Yeah, we just heard that one. Okay, I'll go first.
Can you remind me, what's your name again?
I would have cut down your pause between. Can you remind me what's your name again? I wouldn't have paused so long between them. So instead, can you remind me what's your name again? A little bit too much.
Can you remind me, what's your name again?
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Can you remind me, what's your name again?
What's your name again? What's your name again? I think again your stresses probably could have raised your pitches a little bit more.
Can you remind me?
Can you remind me? Again, listen to some of the other files that we talked about for the Can You Remind Me, because I think you get some more natural intonation patterns. I don't think this is wrong, but I don't think it's what you'd be likely to encounter in normal speech. And say, can you remind me? Like, can you remind me? I think that's going to be a more common phrase and way of saying that.
What's your name again?
And also that linking there with the what and the is again. So those would be my major comments there. Julie, you ready?
Ready.
Okay.
There is no way we'll make it back in time.
Well, that changed. Okay. One more time.
There is no way we'll make it back in time.
Okay. So the thinking about intonation, of course, that's the first thing that stood out. It's very low in pitch. So the overall pitch of the voice is a little low here that made it even just hard to hear the voice. I'm not sure if that's the recording or not. So I don't know if this is your natural pitch range or if you're trying to speak a little low, but it sounded almost too low to my ears. So this is maybe not something we've talked quite, focused on
Mhm.
today. But your habitual pitch, the pitch of your voice sounds a little low, that maybe you're kind of forcing it low. I don't know. Maybe you're
Mm.
straining to keep your voice low. Um, but the quality of the voice sounded a little weak. So it
Mhm.
was hard for me to even hear it.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing. So that's not necessarily accent or pronunciation. That's more vocal quality, but just a little too low, maybe suppressing it and made it a
Yeah.
weak sounding voice.
Yeah. Could have been the recording too.
Okay.
So just make
Okay.
sure, test your recordings, guys, to make sure they're really coming in clear. Next one here.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
I would like your A sound to be stronger. I'm getting name versus name.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Yeah, I think your A sounds a little bit too weak. And that's, if it's a reduced part of your word, you can kind of get away with that. But because this is your stress,
Can you remind me what's your name again?
stress words, you need to make sure that that vowel sound's coming in really clear. So it's not name, it's more name. Can you remind me what's your name again? The other thing I would say too on that is I think you're almost kind of rushing the vowel sound a little bit.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Name versus name. That M sound, you really don't want to come in until the very end. Get the vowel sound clear first, then you can move on to the consonants. English is paying attention to vowel sounds. It's how people understand you clearest. Besides that, though,
Can you remind me what's your name again?
I like your stresses. I think your stresses are on the right spot. So I think you have all the pieces. I think just changing those aspects of name would have made a pretty big difference on this sentence, honestly. All right, Julie, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
Play again.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
There's no way we'll make it back in time. So I liked that, the overall stress pattern there, there's no way. So I heard a good jump in pitch on no way, and it sounded longer on those words as well. We'll make it back in time. Can you play it for me one more
Yeah,
time?
of course.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
There's no way we'll make it back in time. So to kind of talk about that last part of the sentence, the vocal quality again sounded a little like your voice was kind of giving out there at the end. We'll make it back in time. So even the word time, just thinking about the pitch of the voice, it kind of like the voice just kind of got lost there. There's no way we'll make it back in time. I kind of heard just like a little, like the voice just kind of went away. Where if you had kept the voice kind of going a little bit stronger, there's no way we'll make it back in time. You could have ended time, in a nice downward pitch, but you could have had good intonation and good quality that whole way, rather than it kind of fizzling out at the end. But I did like that first part. I thought, no way. That sounded really natural to me. It sounded like it was stressed and kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, kind of get into the vocal fry territory a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Next one here.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
Well, that was fast.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
There's no way we'll make it back in time. No way we'll make it back in time.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
No way we'll make it back in time. Very reduced, which is I'm again in favor of. I'm glad you're experimenting with that.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
I actually don't.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
I don't actually really have a whole lot to say about this. You have a lot of reductions. I think this will sound pretty natural in a conversation and things like that, which is great. If I were going to say anything, it'd probably be a little nitpicky on back.
We'll make it back in time.
Back versus back. I do think your ass sound could be slightly stronger, but again, there's also lots of regional things that kind of come into that too. So that's not even necessarily a problem.
We'll make it back in time.
Time. Maybe also a little bit on time with the I.
In time.
Time versus time. So maybe your I sounds slightly reduced, but again, it's a reduced word, so it doesn't necessarily have to sound perfect. No, we'll make it back in time. Ahmed asked, the back is the most stressed in this case.
There's no way we'll make it back in time.
Yeah, and that's okay. I think in this sentence you can stress back. I don't personally have an issue with that. I think Jonas, this actually was pretty good, personally. Julie, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Play again.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
Can you remind me what's your name again? Play it one more time, please.
Please, of course.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
So, can you remind me what's your name again? Okay, I think the overall intonation sounds okay. Can you remind me what's your name again? And I kind of just da 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 da. Can you remind me what's your name again? Can you remind me what's your name again?
Let me play it again.
Yeah.
Can you remind me what's your name again?
What's your name again?
It gets a little flat there.
What's your name again? What's your name again? Can you remind me what's your name again? I probably would have had a bigger change. I might have kept the overall kind of downward trajectory of my voice, but I might have had a bigger change instead of, what's your name again? What's your name again? There would have been kind of a bigger dip down lower. And I think, Jeff, that's kind of what you mentioned earlier. For some of the speakers, you can drop your pitch even lower on some words to give you more of a range. So that maybe is what I would have done at the end of that instead of, what's your name again? That kind of made it like this. Can you remind me, what's your name again? What's your name again? If you want to just keep going, what's your name again? Just a bigger dip down rather than name again, name again.
I think that's a fair answer. All right, and last one for today. What was this one?
No, Kayla, you don't understand. Where the finish where we started. There's no way we're gonna make it back in time.
Oh. Wow.
All right. Wow is a great way to end it. I'm just going to end it there. Okay, guys, if we did not get to your audio, I am sorry. But there were so many files today. But I imagine that we looked at both sentences, tons of examples, lots of things to pull that you can apply to your own speech and listen to your files back. Julie, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. It was great hearing from you. We'll be sure to check out your programs and things like that. I've also, in the description for this video, I've included links to go do all of your links. Give me a nice link tree there. Wonderful. Any other last things for us?
No, this was so much fun. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Fluent American. I just really enjoyed myself today, and I was just so happy to join you and and work with you today. It was great. Thank you. I had a great time.
Cool. Let's do it again. Cool.
Definitely. I'd be happy to.
Cool. Hey, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you in a future stream, of course. Again, this is every Saturday. If you send in audio, the link never changes. So just keep an eye out later this week. I'll update it so that way you can send in your audio files. It certainly helps if you come in early to make sure that we can take a look at your audio and give you the time that you deserve. But yeah, have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good afternoon, guys. Keep an eye out for our videos coming out this week. Julie, thanks again.
You're welcome.